In the last session that I played live at the Vic, at the 1-3 game, one very interesting river spot came up that is a very crucial one for low life stakes games. It is about river play. On top of that, there were some other interesting hands. I'm not going to spoil it, but you'll see me suffer in this one, so let's jump right into it.
As soon as I sit down, I get pocket queens in the big blind, so happy days, or so I thought. There was a straddle under the gun +1 makes it 15, there is a call in the hijack, another call in the cutoff, and now the older gentleman in the small blind decides to raise it to 65. Now this man is not a player who would only 3-bet aces and kings, he could definitely do this with all sorts of hands, so I'm still very happy here to put in the 4-bet to 140. All these other players get out of the way, and now the older gentleman, he tanks for a while, he looks at my stack, he asks me how much I started the hand with, and then he goes all in. Well, time to take a deep breath. What can he have? Obviously, if he only does this with aces and kings, then this should be a fold. If he mixes in ace-king, well, it's not quite as clear anymore. So in-game I thought that if he does this with about half of all the ace-king combinations, that it would just about be a call, but I was not quite right with my maths. It's very hard to do this type of maths at the table, so I would have had to be good about 37% and I was only good about 33%. But if we play around with it a bit and we say that he does it with 60 or 70 or 80% of all the ace-king combinations, then it becomes a call. However, it's still kind of a bit of a marginal call, and I think in hindsight I should have just folded, but I was a little bit rusty at the time and I just thought, well, it's blind versus blind, let's just flick it in here, there's enough ace-king in there. And funnily enough, later on I saw that this guy only overcalled with ace-king rather than even squeezing with that. Had I had that information at that time, I would definitely have snap folded my queens. Instead, I called and I ran into pocket aces, which is not a surprise, and I lost this one, so not a great start to the day. In the very next hand, now I was small blind, I had a chance to win some money back. Another straddled pot here, this time it folds to me. I have a mandatory raise obviously with ace-king offsuit, I make it 20, and the big blind, who seems to be a passive recreational, I don't know him very well, but he doesn't seem too fancy, he just thinks for quite a while actually before he finally puts in his 20. Under the gun straddler gets out of the way. We have this pretty good flop, I would say, although it's a bit connected. I don't really like it that much, but we have top pair, top kicker, so definitely time to go for value here. Third pot I think is fine. We don't need to go any bigger in this blind versus blind situation. He now calls. The turn brings in a second flush draw, and I was very close to checking at this point because I was thinking like, what can I get called by that I really beat? Because my hand is actually not as great as it looks, but then I said, yeah, there's still enough. There could be something like queen jack, jack 10, 2 clubs, some weird king like a king 9 of hearts or something like that. So I still think I have plenty of value. I didn't want to go too big, so I went 2/3 pot. I could probably have gone a little bit smaller, but I thought it just looks very weak on a double flush board if I go so small. Although in hindsight, if I really thought that he was such a passive player, maybe I should have gone a bit smaller. Anyway, he called here, and on the river I now have an important decision to make, and this is a bread and butter play for live low stakes games. There are only 2 options here in my mind, and neither of them includes check calling, and I think this is what most players would do here, but I just don't think he would bluff enough. Such a passive recreational player. Yes, maybe he would bluff clubs, but then again I even block that with the ace of clubs. So I thought I either check fold here, which seems very nitty, but it's actually not unreasonable because he called twice and he could have something that just beats us here like two pair. And the other option that I see is to just go for small value myself if I think that I can get called by worse. And I thought if he had something like King Jack, Queen Jack, Jack 10 or some other king, basically the same range that called me on the turn when I was ahead, he would still call a small bet with that and he wouldn't turn any of that into a bluff, so I can easily fold if he raises me. So I decided to go for a third pot here and I got snapped off by King 10, so very unlucky again, so I'm down another 150. Another player came to my table, he sat just to my right, and he was a proper loose aggressive player. Now he wasn't great, he wasn't terrible, he was just super loose and super aggressive. So he would just play almost any two cards. I think he was VPipping something like 70 or 80% here. He would raise and 3-bet and call off small jams and things like that. And he makes it 10 here. This is actually already the third hand that we've played against each other. I had already 3-bet him twice. Both times he called and then nothing interesting developed, so I didn't include those hands. But here I 3-bet him again, this time with ace-10 offsuit, and he called again. He hasn't folded to a 3-bet at all yet all night. On 10-10-7, this is a board that I could check or I could bet big. I decided to bet small here. Don't ask me why. I just thought that maybe the lag would check raise me or something like that, but in GTO terms this was a pretty poor sizing here that I chose. I have to admit that, and that's not my only mistake against this player, as you will see soon. He calls here, now I hit the ace again. I'm thinking like, what should I bet here in terms of sizing? Now I was trying to mimic GTO play and I thought, well, the ace is good for my range, so I don't want to go too big here. I just went half pot, but again, this is just too small. I don't know what I was thinking here. He called, and now on the river, when he checked again, I was trying to make up for my mistakes earlier, and I went with an overbet, and I think again I probably chose the wrong size, but I thought he might not believe me that I have an ace here or a 10, so he might call with some ace, or I could even extract a lot of value if he has 10 or 10. So I just decided to overbet, and he thought for a long time, and then unfortunately he folded. If you remember what I just said, this lag to my right opened 3 times and I 3-bet him 3 times. Now there is a straddle and he raises again under the gun, and obviously with my pocket jacks I'm going to 3-bet him for a 4th time within about 15 minutes, thinking that now I could have him. And indeed he obliges. He 4-bets me here from under the gun +1, and normally in GTO terms I would kind of be indifferent here. Pocket jacks could even be a fold, but with this dynamic this is absolutely never a fold here. This guy is a lag and he could take a stand here after I have basically bullied him, although I haven't, but he might think that I have. So I thought that he could 4-bet here with a fairly wide range, including some suited aces, suited kings, offsuit ace queen, ace jack, even pocket sevens. So I've put in this range here, and I think he might even be wider, but with this range he has 84 combos, and I think he would only call with queens plus and ace king, which is 34 combos. So I would get around 60% folds if I jam here, and if he decides to call wider, then I'm very happy with that too. I mean, imagine if I get called by ace 10 or pocket sevens here. But let's see how much fold equity we actually need here in this handy fold equity calculator by Red Chip Poker. So the pot size before I shove is 230. How much do I have to call? Well, he made it 160, so I would have to call 100. And how much am I shoving in total? That would be 540. And the equity, if I get called, as we saw on Flopzilla, that was 36% of the time. So we need him to fold 31% of his range, and we're getting 60% folds as I thought, and so I decided to indeed jam here, but unfortunately he snapped me off with pocket aces. No help on the board for me, so I'm down about 1400 at this point. After all the beatings that I've taken, I now have ace-king offsuit on the button, there is a straddle, a limp, we make it 25, the big blind calls, the straddler calls, the limper calls, wonderful, we go 4-way to a flop, at least I have position, and at least I flop really nicely here with 2 aces and a 6. It checks to me, and in a multi-way pot I tend not to lead much, but I have position here, I have a really good hand, and this is a flop that's good for my range, so I decide to go still pretty tiny here, thinking that I must have the best hand almost always, because I'm only losing to ace-6 or pocket sixes, so I just want to milk someone with an ace here, and for now only the limper obliges. On this turn here he checks again, and I just decide to continue betting. I didn't want to make it too big here because I thought I could get more value on the river. If he has an ace, he will probably not fold, but I still think pot geometry wasn't great on my side here. I could have gone something like 70, 75, which would have been half pot, and I would still have gotten called by an ace. So there wasn't great sizing, but at least we get called. And on this river here, I mean, now we lose to also pocket 9s, pocket 5s, and 7, 8. But I mean, how likely is he to have called, especially with 7, 8 on the flop? 5s and 9s is possible, but whatever. I mean, I just want to stack an ace here, although you could argue that an ace with a weak kicker might not call my triple barrel here, but I didn't care. I just went all in, and he called pretty quickly. He showed an ace. I don't know what his kicker was, but I was good, and I won this first really nice pot this whole evening after about 4 hours of playing.
Not my best session for sure, but at least I recovered a bit at the end, even though I still lost over 700 pounds in about 5 hours of play. But if you want to see me do a bit better, check out this video here.